بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Tonight's lesson will be on wal-Marjan فيما اتفق عليه الشيخان. Obviously we're still in Kitab al-Siyam, coming up on the tail end of Kitab al-Siyam, B'idhnillahi ta'ala, discussing some of the sub-chapters and sub-issues. And what we reached so far is chapter number 27, Babu Qada' al-Siyami 'an al-Mayyit. Babu Qada' al-Siyam 'an al-Mayyit. States, observing Sawm in lieu of the mist on behalf of a dead person. Fasting on behalf of a dead Muslim. Is it obligatory to fast? Recommended? Permissible? Making up their missed fasts? Missed obligatory fast? Missed fast based off of vows? The dead Muslim who's a relative? You're an heir, an heiress to that dead Muslim, or any Muslim which there's no bloodline between you and him, right? It doesn't say any of that. Hadith number 704, he says, Hadith Aisha radiallahu anha, anna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam qal, man mata wa alayhi siyamun, sama anhu waliyuhu. حديث ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما قال جاء رجل إلى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم فقال يا رسول الله إن أمي ماتت وعليها صوم شهر أفأقضيه عنها قال نعم فدين الله أحق أن يقضى. There are two hadiths here in this chapter. The first is number 704, and that is the narration of Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her. Allah's Messenger, peace and blessings be upon him, said, whoever died and he ought to have observed Sawm, then his guardians must observe Sawm on his behalf. And then we have the Hadith 705, is the narration of Ibn Abbas, may Allah be pleased with them both. A man came to the Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, and said, "O Allah's Messenger, my mother died and she ought to have observed Sawm 1 month. Shall I observe Sawm on her behalf?" The Prophet, peace and blessings of Allah, replied in the affirmative and said, Allah's debts have more right to be paid. Allah's debts have more right to be paid. So we have two narrations. One is of Aisha and one is of Abdullah ibn Abbas. And obviously both of them are from the 7 most prolific hadith reporters from the companions. And both of them affirm and establish and mandate the legality of fasting on behalf of a dead Muslim. Fasting on the behalf of a dead Muslim. One is qawli, the Prophet ﷺ is directing the people, and the second is also qawli, or taqriri, and or a bit of both, and that is based off of a question. Someone asked the Prophet ﷺ about a specific issue. And both of them affirm the permissibility and the legality of fasting on behalf of a deceased Muslim. Another thing that we see that is parallel between both hadiths, both reports, is that there is a blood relation. And it isn't just fasting for anyone. The first one says, waliyuhu, the wali. And the second one talks about a person's mother. Neither of these two hadiths affirm fasting on behalf of any Muslim, which there's no bloodline between you and him. So pay attention to that. And that's going to be very important when we get into the rulings and the fiqh of the chapter and of the hadiths. As far as the chapter heading, then it affirms one of the rulings of fasting. And something which is very practical and probable. And that is Muslims dying with debts to Allah, and those debts to Allah are the debts of fasting. that's extremely practical. People, they make promises, people miss days, men, women, for whatever reason, and they die, and they leave behind heirs, they leave behind people who inherit from them, relatives and family members, what is to be done for their spiritual debts towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is the connection between the chapter heading and the book of fasting. As far as the connection between the hadiths and the chapter heading, then it clearly shows Babu, Jawazi, Qada'is, etc. The permissibility of fasting and making up those days for the deceased Muslim and or the obligation. Everyone clear on this? Regardless of the specifics. طيب. An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, he says regarding these hadiths in this chapter, he says اختلف العلماء في من مات وعليه صوم واجب من رمضان أو قضاء أو نذر أو غيره هل يقضى عنه. He says first and foremost is that the scholars of Islam, the fuqaha, the jurists, they differ on this issue. A Muslim who dies and there is fasting upon this Muslim, days that are missed which are mandatory, wajib, mandatory fasts from Ramadan, or making them up, or a vow, or غيره, or anything else, in which a Muslim had to pay a penalty, kathara, fast 3 days, fast 10 days, fast 6 months, or 2 months, whatever the issue may be, in which they must make up those days, and they have died without fasting those days. هل يقضى عنه? Should we make up the missed days for the dead Muslim or not? Scholars, they differ on that issue. وللشافعي في المسألة قولان مشهوران أشهرهما لا يصام عنه ولا يصح عن ميت صوم أصلا، والثاني يستحب لوليه أن يصوم عنه ويصح صومه عنه ويبرأ به الميت ولا يحتاج إلى إطعام عنه. وهذا القول هو الصحيح المختار الذي نعتقده، هو الذي صححه محقق أصحابنا الجامعون بين الفقه والحديث لهذه الأحاديث الصحيحة الصريحة. Nawawi states, as far as my madhab, Nawawi, what he is an expert in, he says, he's most familiar with, he says the Shafi'i way is a fork in the road. There are two views that have been handed down and transmitted from Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, two of them. The first is in the negative. And that is, he says, La yusam anhu. No fasts are to be made up for the deceased Muslim, period. No fasts are made up for the deceased Muslim, regardless of the reason. And it is invalid to do so. And the second view that the disciples of Imam Shafi'i got from him and passed on is the exact opposite. Is that it is permissible and that it is recommended for the wali, the relative or the heir, the bloodline relative, to fast on behalf of the deceased Muslim. And the fast will be valid, and the debt and the responsibility will be taken from the deceased Muslim. The debt and the responsibility will be taken away from the deceased Muslim, and there's no need for any type of feeding. We don't have to take $500 or 500 pounds from his money and feed any poor people on behalf of him dying without fulfilling those fasts. My brother died, I fast the 10 days, the 3 days, the 6 days, and then that's it. Khalas, done, over. Nothing is needed. There isn't any additional penalty or kafara or atonement that has to be done. Everybody clear on that? Moving forward. He says in this second view, and now we're within the Shafi'i method, we're not outside talking about the other scholars yet. He says that is the correct view, according to Nawawi. That's the view that he says, na'taqiduhu, we believe is correct. And we deem it to be the strongest and to make the most sense. And this is also the view, or it is the view that was also adopted by the strong Shafi'i scholars. Muhaqqiqu ashabina. The Shafi'i scholars that were strong. The Shafi'i scholars who combined between both ways. The way of hadith and the way of fiqh. Pay close attention to these words. Those who married and merged both ways, hadith and fiqh together. Not just focusing on fiqh, madhab, taqleed, fulan. Not just focusing on just the hadith and nothing else, but a mixture of both. He says, and they took this view, and we take this view because of these authentic hadiths, which are sarihah, right to the point. And once more, if you have Sahih Muslim in your household, you're going to highlight and underline that. If you have a notebook or a moleskin or some type of diary, you're going to write that in, and that's a qa'idah, a golden principle. That is what the proper fiqh is based upon. The clear and authentic hadiths, for which there are no contradicting hadiths, no clashing hadiths, no objecting hadiths. There's no abrogation. It isn't a hadith which is authentic but unclear. Authentic but its dilala, its proof and its usage is vague. The hadith combines both. It's sahih, authentic, and it is sarih, frank, right to the point. I.e., we have no other proof or evidence from Quran and from ijma' going against those clear proofs from the sunnah, then we must take it. Everyone understand this principle? And this is Islam. This is Islam. This is the correct way. This is the way of Ahlul Hadith, Ahlul Sunnah, and this is the way of a Salaf al-Salih, the pious predecessors, the true way of the Salaf al-Salih, the true way, and not the hijacked way, and the forgeries, and the bandits who try to steal and use the name and abuse the name and monopolize the name. This is the true way of the Salaf al-Salih. Is that there's nothing that goes against this view, nothing that goes against this fiqh ruling in the Quran, other hadiths, ijma', etc. So we must take it. And of course, this position, Nawawi, may Allah have mercy upon him, he took this view, and perhaps we said he adopted this view from his predecessor, from his ancestor, Shafi'i himself, the founder of the school. And that is found in many athar, in which people would sit with Imam Shafi'i, and they would say kada, they would report a hadith, they would narrate a hadith, and they would say, Ata'khudhu bihi, Ata'khudhu bih. Do you take this view? Oh, Imam, is this your view? Is this your view? And one of those athar, he said that Imam Shafi'i became angry and mad. And he said to the man, like, what's wrong with you? He says, do you see me wearing this dress of a Christian? This headpiece of a Christian? Do you see me with this type of belt or sash around my waist like the Christians wear out of them? In other words, like, what's wrong with you? What do you think? Do I take it? Of course I take it. It's the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. It's authentic. There's no ta'aruf. There's no clash. Another hadith which is muqawwam, which goes against it. What do you mean, ata'khudhu bihi? What do you mean, do you adopt it? What do you mean by that? And of course, that is the pure spirit of al-ittiba'. Authenticity, clarity. There's no room to be Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali, Hanafi. There's no room for Sheikh Fulan scholars. There's no room for that because the proof is clear. The proof is direct. There's nothing that's stronger or strong as it to go against it, to clash with it. You have to take it. That's what it means to Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Everybody understand this as a golden principle from Nawawi and also from Shafi'i rahimahullah. طيب. And then he says here, وأما الحديث الوارد من مات وعليه صيام أطعم عنه أو أطعم عنه فليس بثابت ولو ثبت أمكن الجمع بينه وبين هذه الأحاديث بأن يحمل على جواز الأمرين فإن من يقول بالصيام يجوز عنده الإطعام فثبت أن الصواب المتعين تجويز الصيام وتجويز الإطعام. الصواب المتعين تجويز الصيام وتجويز الإطعام والولي مخير بينهما والمراد بالولي القريب سواء كان عصبة أو وارثا أو غيرهما وقيل المراد الوارث وقيل العصبة والصحيح الأول. طيب, moving forward, states here, Nawawi, he then says, as far as the hadith that is mentioned, whoever dies and he owes fasts, you should feed on his behalf. Whoever dies and he has a debt of fasting, then you should feed on his behalf. He says that this hadith is not sahih, it's not authentic. And that's another golden principle of proper fiqh. No fiqh ruling is going to be based off of a totally weak hadith. You don't build upon something which is totally inauthentic. And that is very abundant in the madhahib, the schools of thought. Also, things become even worse when we reach 2020, and there's a need for flexibility. There's a need for things to be resilient and say, no, you can't take that. You can't say that ijtihad. You can't make the Eid here. You can't make Etiquette there. You can't do this here. You can't. And that fiqh view from 700 years ago, 800 years ago, was originally based off of a da'if hadith. Now it's even worse. Everyone understand this? Moving forward. Then Nawawi gives you more food. He says, and if it was authentic, it's a higher level of skill now. It's to learn how to understand the weak hadiths and how to deal with them as well, and how to harmonize between them well if they were authentic. If they were. He says, and if it was authentic, then it'll be easy to combine and harmonize between the hadiths. And that is by saying, is that the wali has the option. Either you make up the days for your father, or you feed on your father's behalf. And that's because those who hold the view that the days should be made up by the relative, they also hold the view is that it's permissible and lawful to feed on their behalf. So there's no problem, no mushkila here. He says, and the wali has either of the two. Either you make the 6 days, the 3 days, the 10 days, or you feed 6 people, 10 people, 60 people, whatever the debt may be. Everybody understand this? Moving forward. He then explains the hadith by saying, as far as the wali, then he is the qareeb, a relative. Regardless, whether the relative is an heir, an heiress, or not. And obviously there are different levels and types of close relative. When we talk about inheritance, we have a warith, someone specifically mentioned in the Quran and the hadiths, and then the asaba, okay, the kin, the kith, all right, the different terminologies of inheritance. Tayyib, everybody understand this? And of course, for the details of this, you should, bidnillahi ta'ala, sign up for the class and take the classes that we have going on right now and we've done with regards to the will in Islam and inheritance in al-Islam. We've done the will, alhamdulillah, successfully. Part 1 of the inheritance, successfully. And inshallah ta'ala, this coming Thursday will be part 2 of the inheritance. If you want to know the difference between warith and asaba, and what are the differences between the two, inshallah ta'ala, sign up for the class, bi'idhnillah. Moving forward, he says, some say that is a close one, regardless whether it's asaba or warith or other than that. And others, they say it's only the heir, etc. Moving forward, he says, وَلَوْ صَامَ عَنْهُ أَجْنَبِيٌّ إِنْ كَانَ بِإِذْنِ الْوَلِيِّ صَحْ وإلا فلا في الأصح ولا يجب على الولي الصوم عنه لكن يستحب هذا تلخيص مذهبنا في المسألة. He says, as far as if a non-relative fasts on behalf of the dead Muslim, someone who is not related, someone who isn't related, if they decide, you know what, brother Fulan from the masjid died and I know he has days that he missed, I want to fast on his behalf. Is that valid or not? He says here is that if it's by the permission of the relative or the family member, then it is valid. It can be done. And if the family member does not allow, it cannot be done. According to the most correct view. I mean, the scholars, they differ on that as well. And some scholars, Shafi'is and others, they say what? Is that a non-relative, someone who isn't a family member, can fast on behalf of the dead Muslim even without the permission of the relative. Everybody clear on that? Moving forward. He says, furthermore, the next point or the next issue, it is not obligatory upon the relative and the Muslim to fast. It's only recommended. That's their debt. I'm not responsible for that. I only am recommended and encouraged to do it, not obliged. Moving forward. He says, and this is the summary of the Shafi'i school. This is the summary of our madhab. And once more, it shows us how to systematically study fiqh. If you're studying one madhab, lock that down first. Master that first. Become clear in your own school before you branch off to other schools. Moving forward, he says, وَمِمَّنْ قَالَ بِهِ مِنَ السَّلَفِ طَاوُوسٌ وَالْحَسَنُ الْبَصْرِي وَالزُّهْرِي وَقَتَادَةُ وَأَبُو ثَوْرٍ وبه قال الليث وأحمد وإسحاق وأبو عبيد في صوم النذر دون رمضان وغيره وذهب الجمهور إلى أنه لا يصام عن ميت لا نذر ولا غيره أو غيره. حكاه ابن المنذر عن ابن عمر وابن عباس وعائشة ورواية عن الحسن والزهري، وبه قال مالك وأبو حنيفة. قال القاضي عياض وغيره وقول جمهور العلماء. Tight. As far as other scholars besides Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, who took that previous view that you can make up the fast, it is recommended, whether it's a vow or Ramadan, whatever is fard, he says, then there are many from the Salaf who had this view. Tayyib. First and foremost is, he says, from them is Tawus, the disciple of Ibn Abbas, Tawus ibn Kaysan, Hassan al-Basri, Zuhri, Qatada, Abu Thawr, Layth ibn Sa'd, Imam Ahmad, Imam Ishaq ibn Rahoya, Abu Ubaid, the friend of Imam Ahmad. They held the view here pertaining to the nadhr, the vow that's obligatory. The vow, the nadhr that one makes, and not the mandatory Ramadan or any other type of kaffara. So that is the view of Shafi'i and those from the Tabi'een. Hassan Basri, Zuhri, Qatada, Tawus, Abu Thawr, Imam Ahmad, Ishaq, etc. Right, that's view number one. Moving forward, he then says in the majority of the ulama, most of the fuqaha, most of the jurists, they hold a view which is contrary to that view. And that is, there is no fasting to be made up for the dead Muslim, period. He's dead, he's gone, khalas. Don't make any days up for that dead Muslim, that deceased Muslim, period. Nothing pertaining to a vow or anyone else. And this view has been mentioned by Ibn al-Mundhir rahimahullah by the following: Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Aisha radiallahu anha, and once is the view of Hassan Basri, it's a riwayah, and also Az-Zuhri as well. Both views have been narrated from them. And this was the view of Imam Malik and the view of Imam Abu Hanifa. They held the view that there's no fasting to be made for the deceased Muslim. Qadi Iyad and others from the commentators on Sahih Muslim, they say, and this is the view of most of the scholars of Islam, the Jumhur al-Ulama, they hold the opposite view. So what do we benefit from this? First and foremost, we know that there's difference of opinion. So if there's difference of opinion, no one can come and make it into an issue of ijma' and force one who differs with you, one who's your fiqh opponent or dawah opponent, and force them into the corner and make tadlil, say that you're astray and you're misguided. That's number one. Number two is that the student of knowledge, the alim, has to now dig into the proofs and evidences and use his own ijtihad and see what makes the most sense to you and take that. Everybody understand this? A layman Muslim sticks with precaution. The layman Muslim may stick with the statement of the majority. The layman Muslim sticks with the fatwa of his mufti. The layman Muslim does that which he's taught in his country until it's clearly proven and shown on the contrary. Everybody got that? This is the etiquette of issues of difference of opinion with regards to the alim, the talib al-ilm, and the layman. Moving forward, Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala, before we go that far, this also shows us how there are different views that Shafi'i took or Imam Ahmad took, and scholars said that it wasn't the view of the Jumhur. And of course, as we've explained many times before, Shafi'i was never accused of shududh, being strange and weird and peculiar. Imam Ahmad was never attacked of going against the ulama. But if Ibn Hazm does it, that's what they say about Ibn Hazm. It's shududh. Okay? The madhabi people of today, the different scholars and doctors and muftis of today, when it's a view that does not coincide with one of the four madhabs, they say, oh, it's just the view of Sheikh al-Albani, and you can't take that view. It's not orthodox. He went against all of the other ulama. No one held the view except for Imam Shafi'i and San'ani. We can't take that view. It has to be within the four madhabs. It can't go against the majority. Okay, what about Imam Ahmad goes against the majority? How many issues? Shafi'i goes against the majority. How many issues? Abu Hanifa goes against the majority. How many issues? Imam Malik goes against the majority. How many issues? And he never, ever, ever accused any of those imams of shududh. Obviously, that's unfair to Ibn Hazm. And that's unfair to San'ani, Shawkani, Albani, or whoever it is. That's unfair. Let alone the fact that all of those tabi'een that he mentioned as well. Tayyib, moving forward. He then says here, وَتَأَوَّلُ الْحَدِيثَ على أنه يطعم عنه أو يطعم عنه وليه، وهذا تأويل ضعيف بل باطل. وأي ضرورة إليه وأي مانع يمنع من العمل بظاهره. الله أكبر. Look at the beauty of this speech. Nawawi then says, as far as those other scholars, the majority, then they have interpreted the hadith. In other words, don't go and say that Imam Malik is against the sunnah. Abu Hanifa is upon the bid'ah and he's not following the sunnah. This madhab has no hadith. Don't say that. They know the hadith is there, but they interpret it and they understood it in a different way, in a different light. They could be wrong in that, but it doesn't mean that they obstinately went against the proof and says we don't care about the hadith. Don't say that. Don't disrespect those ulama. He says they interpreted it, they understood it differently, and they said that what's meant by sama anhu waliyuhu, his wali will fast on his behalf, is yut'im, will feed on his behalf. So the word sama now means yut'im. Nawawi, obviously, he bats this out of the park. He says this is false, bal batil. Rather, he says it's weak, and then he says rather it's false. Once more, Nawawi has no hesitation in saying the view of Abu Hanifa, Malik, this one, Ibn Umar, Ibn Abbas, their ra'i and their ta'wil is batil. Someone comes along, he takes Imam Shafi'i's view, and he says Imam Shafi'i akhta, he made a mistake, or Shafi'i etc., etc. Oh no, you can't say that, akhi. This disrespect to Shafi'i. Use adab, use it. No, he didn't have no problem calling that view not only weak, but batil. Batil. He says, and there's no need for it. There's no need for this interpretation. Allahu Akbar. That's another golden principle. There's no need for interpreting it in another way, i.e., against the organic Arabic language. Sama, and not at'ama. That's a qaida. Why do you have to figuratively interpret this verse or this hadith? Why? Why is it majaz? Why isn't it literal? Why isn't it ala dhahirihi? Listen carefully. He says, وَأَيُّ ضُرُورَةٍ إِلَيْهِ. What is the need? What's the need? In other words, there are conditions for a valid interpretation. And from those conditions, number one is that there has to be a proof for it. A dalil, that's what's meant by this. And secondly, there has to be a need for it. No proof, no need, stick with the zahir. I hope you guys are listening. I hope the tulab al-ilm, the du'at, whoever watches this, I hope you're listening. I hope the layman Muslims who complain about confusion and fighting and different dawahs and the different aqidas and the different speakers, I hope you're listening to these golden words. Is the asl, is the default, is the zahir. And there's no diverging from that zahir unless there is a need, unless there is a solid and valid proof. Unless you have that, you stick with the zahir. There's also a refutation of some people who say, if you don't follow a madhab, if you don't study a madhab, if you're not fanatical about a madhab, then you're a zahiri. And you're just zahiri, you're just too literal, you're just too much of a zahiri. The asl is the zahir, until it's proven otherwise. So if a brother, he says, I'll be there, or he says, I'm outside, akhi, I said, I'll be there in a second. And I took 5 minutes. He says, you weren't literal. There wasn't the zahir. There's dalil that I'm not coming in a literal second. And that's the custom of the people. A well-known, unanimously accepted custom. Give me a sec. I'll be there in a sec. Before you finish the sentence, the watch hand has ticked. The second has went by. So it's ma'lum bil-durura that a second isn't literal. Number one. Number two is that there is a need for a person to say that, meaning I'm coming, hold your horses, just give me a second, I'll be there real fast. Everyone understand the difference? And if you have no proof, and if you have no evidence, then there's no ta'wil. There's no interpreting it really means this and warping it from its straight meaning in the Arabic language. And this pertains to fiqh, and of course this pertains to Allah's names and attributes. This pertains to Allah's names and attributes, and the unseen, and the grave, and the jinn, and the angels, and shaitan does this, and shaitan is here, and this and that. It's all ala zahir until there's a proof that it means something else, and it has to be a durura, an absolute need. I hope you guys are listening. I hope you can appreciate this authenticity, the purity of true Islamic scholarship. True Islamic scholarship. Moving forward, know what he then says, giving you another golden principle. He says, and what is the thing that prevents or stops you from acting upon the zahir? What's the problem? What's the mushkila for the living Muslim to fast on behalf of the dead Muslim? What is the proof or text that the person is going against? What is the clash? And there's nothing. So take the zahir. Moving forward, مع تظاهر الأحاديث مع عدم المعارض لها. He says, even though there's so many hadiths on the subject, and there's nothing which is mu'arid, which clashes with it. And when you read the works of Shawkani and others, you'll find that Shawkani mentions other terms, such as muqawim, musawin, muqaddamin alayhi. A proof or an evidence which is equal. In other words, this hadith is more authentic, this is totally weak, etc. This is the statement of a companion, this is the hadith of the Prophet. This is the statement of a companion, this is the hadith of the Khalifa, Abu Bakr. It's not musawin, it's not equal to it. Or it isn't something which is muqaddam alayhi, which takes greater precedence. There's nothing to go against it, which is strong, so why not? Stick with the dhahir until it is a need and necessity to do otherwise. Tayyib, khair inshallah. We'll stop here tonight, and hopefully, bidnillahi ta'ala, we'll continue this discussion. It's a very important discussion, and as we always say, we stick with what we're learning, what we're talking about, what we're discussing, and at the same time we branch off and we take the freshly squeezed juice, bidnillahi ta'ala, and extract the fawaid organically from the speech as we go along. And of course, the viewers are of different types and different classes. There are laymen watching, there are tulab ilm, there are people overseas in Arab countries, watchers from around the world, wanting much more than just the basic A, B, and C. It's permissible, it's not permissible, Sheikh Fulan said it, Sheikh Fulan, so on and so forth. Hopefully you guys can understand this, and inshallah ta'ala you guys can appreciate this and value this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. Wa sallallahu sallam mubarak ala abdihi wa rasulihi nabina wa imamina Muhammad.